Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar on the crisis of internet affordability. My name is Amy Hamblin, and I am a policy advisor at NextGen Policy. I'm joined here today with my colleague Arturo Juarez, who is also a policy advisor at NextGen and program manager. I'm also joined with colleagues from the California Emerging Technology Fund. My pleasure to welcome Sunny McPeak, sorry about that, President and CEO of CETF, as well as Marissa Conche, who is the Adoption Program Director at CETF. We're so glad that you are able to join us today because we're really facing an urgent crisis right now with internet affordability that is threatening and in fact already rolling back many of the gains and the progress that was made during the pandemic to narrow and hopefully eventually close the digital divide. COVID-19, of course, spurred a lot of action and dollars that was directed toward tackling digital inequity. And we saw great progress, especially with the Affordable Connectivity Program, ACP, which you'll hear a lot more about today, which unfortunately has expired due to congressional inaction and an inability to renew funding for this program. And we also are facing, of course, a looming and large deficit in California. And all of this is just kind of threatening to upend all the progress made with the digital divide. So, Andrea, if you don't mind, we're going to move to the next slide. So the objective of today's webinar is really to put a spotlight on the current crisis of internet affordability, looking at what the current state is of the digital divide, especially as it relates to access to reliable broadband internet and the affordability issue, to provide a kind of brief recap of the success story of the Affordable Connectivity Program, share lessons learned about outreach in particular that really helped us achieve a really high adoption rate, although obviously never good enough, still only about 50% of all eligible households in California. And then finally, we're going to close looking at some opportunities for action now. One quick housekeeping note, we are recording this. And I think with that, let's dive in. So next slide, Andrea. So just briefly, some introductions. I am with NextGen Policy. We are a California-based and focused Black-led nonprofit organization. We fight for progressive, justice-centered policies and programs that will help move California forward. And on the issue of digital equity, we work both programmatically and through policy advocacy to close the digital divide and to deliver and ultimately achieve digital equity. And I will just briefly mention maybe a few of our programs. I'm here with my colleague Arturo Juarez, who manages one of our programs that we actually do, a digital navigator program with Compton College. We also, while ACP was around, had organized and done a lot of on-the-ground ACP enrollment programs and enrollment drives. We've worked, I think, on trying to think how many countless initiatives, both programmatically and also advancing policy as well. And we co-founded the California Alliance for Digital Equity, CADE, which is a large statewide alliance that promotes digital equity and fights for policies that advance that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sunny McPeak to tell us a little bit about her organization.
Thank you, Amy and Andrea. Let's just go to the next slide. Thank you. It is a pleasure for me and Marissa, on behalf of the California Emerging Technology Fund, to join you, Amy, and Arturo, all of the NextGen Policy team, and especially our Executive Director, Arnie Sowell, in not only presenting this briefing today, but working together over the last year to promote the Affordable Connectivity Program. The California Emerging Technology Fund was established by the California Public Utilities Commission in 2005 as a public benefit out of corporate mergers. That was a unprecedented and to this day a very unique action by a public utilities commission in this country to identify the need to close the digital divide. The mission to close the digital divide was assigned to California Emerging Technology Fund, and we understand that to include promoting digital inclusion, all in the interest of achieving digital equity. CETF for more than a decade has called digital access a 21st century civil right. We understand the imperative to getting everybody online in order to have the opportunity to fulfill their talents and to contribute to the California future. We have, over the last 16 years, worked with a network of more than 100 community-based organizations as grantee partners, also public agencies, to actually reach more than 1 million households to get them online with affordable internet service. Most recently, that was the Affordable Connectivity Program, and then also to train more than 1 million people in digital literacy. So with that, we have gained a lot of experience on what it takes to close the digital divide by promoting digital inclusion in order to achieve what the legislature, along with Governor Newsom, have actually led the nation in doing, been pioneering in the quest for digital equity. With that, we have this background of experience that leads us to be able to share with you today what it takes to get the job done, or what we call the digital equity ecosystem. And I'll close with this introduction by saying the experience that we've had together, CETF and Next Gen Policy, underscores how challenging it is to reach those who are the most digitally disadvantaged, who are the most economically fragile, and why the continued focus from the legislature, leadership from the legislature, is going to be essential to get the job done, as all of your elected officials, the members, and the governor have pledged to do. With that, Amy, I think we're moving on.
Yep. And Sunny, I'm going to pass it back to you to kind of walk us through the current state of the digital divide, kind of where we're at and how, and maybe start with a few definitions, kind of what we mean by digital equity and digital inclusion, et cetera. Andrea, if you don't mind moving on to the next slide. And just one more.
Thank you. And we have at the California Emerging Technology Fund tried to make this understandable for ourselves, and we think this is a good way to think about it, that the digital divide is the challenge, digital inclusion is the process, and digital equity is the result, which we call CPR, but it's easier to remember that. And they're not exactly the same, although sometimes those terms are used interchangeably, but we're trying to drive to the state of digital equity when every person, every household has access at a quality service, a speed that's sufficient to support the prevalent consumer uses, in particular remote or distance learning and telehealth, and that is a right, which we call the 21st century civil right, thanks to the legislature and the governor. California was the first in this last year to actually enact the Digital Equity Bill of Rights. So regardless of socioeconomic status, where one lives, whatever their backgrounds are, that we have access to the internet. And I think with that, we are going to go, Andrea, to the next slide, just to review what many of you already know, but I know I keep revisiting this so that I can focus on what are we really talking about in terms of those households that are the poorest, most disadvantaged economically, and therefore the most disadvantaged digitally, and how many folks are there that we're really trying to reach. And it's 2.4 million people and 800,000 households. Now, there's actually a lot more households who are low income, a lot more who are qualified for the Affordable Connectivity Program, and we will review those statistics in just a while. But as we look to the future and have limited resources, particularly when we're in years with projected budget deficits, not just this year, we need to look at our existing dollars and use them as wisely as possible to target the most disadvantaged. And so keep in mind, it's 800,000 households. That's about 2.4 million people. This data is from the 2023 statewide digital equity survey that the Department of Technology, in partnership with the California Emerging Technology Fund, did with University of Southern California as our research partner. And the study informed the department's submission of the Digital Equity Plan to NTIA, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, and the California Public Utilities Commission submission of the BEAD plan, BEAD being Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Plan. So both of those plans were required to be submitted by all states in order for each state to get its fair share of broadband dollars from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021. We call the circumstance a divide because we have disproportionate access to the internet based on background and income. So the overall data for the state of California is that actually 91% of all households are online. And 3% of the 91% of those households are what we call underconnected. They have a smartphone only, which can be, it's a marvelous device. It works for many households, but if you are a household with children in school, you really have to have more than a smartphone and more connectivity than just what you generally get with a smartphone. And so if you consider, okay, 9% is those that are unconnected overall for the population, with another 3%. So the 88% of households that are fully connected, 18.8% of all low-income households are digitally disadvantaged, unconnected and underconnected. 15.5% of Latino families, actually Latino families have continued to increase over the last 15 years since we've been doing this survey. And then almost 19% of non-English speakers are disadvantaged. What is common to all of the demographic groups who are disadvantaged economically is poverty. And so the concentration of poverty has to be kept in mind, which we recognize is rooted in systemic racism. So there has to be a very holistic approach to tackling the digital divide. To the next slide, please, Andrea. And sometimes you'll have constituents come to your district offices, or your member may serve on another policy committee that isn't related to technology. We want to hasten to say that technology is just a tool. And it really is not about the technology per se, the work that we do. It is about how technology empowers residents to do things. So you might have a concern about low-income households, which we do. So you want to ask how many of your residents who are low income have access to the internet. You may have a member who serves on an education committee. So what is the access that your constituents have, particularly if they live in a low-income neighborhood in a school that is underperforming? Does that school allow a device for each student? Does that device get to go home? Does the school district actually train the parents? You may have a member who serves on a health or human services committee. And if you've ever tried to sign up for benefits or apply For a job, which is the next focus, you have to have the internet available to you, as you well know. And of course, those who are medically disadvantaged happen to be those who are also digitally disadvantaged and don't have access, oftentimes, to just the general practitioner, let alone specialty care, to ensure that the resident gets the best medical advice. And lastly, we all know what it takes to apply for a job these days. One must be online to do so. So we just wanted to underscore, it's not about the technology, it's about how we use the technology, and whatever is the focus of your member, whatever committee they serve on, this is germane to the work that you are doing. Next slide, please. Okay, I think that's
I'll
you,
take
Amy.
it from here. I was going to say, I'll
Yes.
take it from here. I don't know if you had any other things you wanted to mention before we move on.
I think we can come back and we'll handle it all in questions and answers. We're looking forward to the conversation. So thank you, Amy.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Sunny. So we're now going to look at the Affordable Connectivity Program, ACP, as we call it for short, and what the loss of that subsidy really means for Californian families. So Andrea, if you can just advance to the next slide. So as Sunny was mentioning, the ACP program actually came out of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the IIJA Act passed by Congress in November 2021. And it was a program, as the name implies, to really address the issue of internet affordability, to tackle that piece of the equation, and really the largest challenge for most families in terms of being able to access reliable internet. And Andrea, if you can, no, actually, sorry, just keep it there. So I was getting ahead of myself. So the ACP provided a subsidy, and it was a federal program of up to $30 a month for eligible households. And there was a variety of ways that you could be eligible based on enrollment in other benefits programs, based on your income level, etc. That was directly applied to your internet bill. So if your internet bill was $30 or less, your internet service was free. If it was more than that, you'd get, $30 off that. And that was a big deal for a lot of families. That actually made, internet affordable or free. And for tribal households, it was actually up to $75 a month. And then in addition to the internet service plan piece of it, there was also a subsidy for devices. So there was a one-time subsidy of up to $100 off of a device, whether that was a laptop, a tablet, or a desktop computer. And the program, as we'll get into in the next slide, was, I would say, a great success as far as adoption rates. But unfortunately, Congress could not get its act together to renew funding for the program. And so the program unfortunately ended in May of this year. So last month, April was the last full month of the subsidy where people got that full $30 off their bill. And then there was a partial benefit that was applied in May. And now that we're in June, families that were previously enrolled in that program are now facing, the full brunt of their internet bills or losing service. So Andrea, if you can advance us to the next slide. So as far as kind of what the ACP program looked like in California, we had and have 5.8 million households here in the state that were eligible for ACP. And that was about, I think, 45% of all households in California were eligible for this program. So it actually had really wide reach in terms of who was eligible to participate in the program. And of that 5.8 million, half ended up by the time of the program sunsetting being enrolled in it. And on the one hand, if you're a half glass full person, that's actually a very high adoption rate for a benefits program. If your glass half full or half empty, you know, you'd say there's still half of households out there that could be getting $30 off their internet bill, and who doesn't want that? And we'll get to more of kind of the details of that outreach and adoption piece in just a minute. But I just want to kind of briefly highlight that it was an enormous undertaking by, you know, different government agencies in the state, and mostly really organizations, grassroots organizations like CETF, and our own doing outreach effort, doing really active outreach effort to help walk people through the process. It is not straightforward, as is the case with most benefits programs, which is really unfortunate because that was often a barrier for folks. And I know Sunny and Marissa have some great stats that they might share with you in a minute about, you know, the number of folks you have to reach out to in order to get that one family to enroll and who might need additional support. But there was a lot of hand-holding, a lot of answering questions and walking people through the application in order to get to that 50% number of households being enrolled. And I will also say, I believe, Sunny, Marissa, correct me if I'm wrong, there were only 2 other states by the end of this that were ahead of us as far as our adoption rate. So I
That's
think
correct, Amy. Yes.
so. Hats off to, you know, everyone in the state who played a role in getting us to that mark. Again, we could have done so much more, I think, given more time, but it was still a huge undertaking. And what this really means is that that 5.8 million households, you know, are now kind of in a really perilous place as far as being faced with either, you know, potentially cutting costs to afford the internet, or you know, losing internet access. And you know, of that 2.9 million that we know had the ACP program, they in particular are faced with some really tough choices now that we're in June, and they've, you know, fully lost that ACP subsidy. So Andrea, if you can take me to the next slide. So I don't want to spend too much time here being backward looking, but I just want to kind of briefly explain what the wind down period looks like, to kind of explain where we're at now as far as kind of customers, what their awareness is of this program, and where there might be some confusion, especially for those of you who maybe work in a district office who might be fielding questions about this. So the ACP wind down period from our perspective was fairly short, and I think there was always a little bit of hope that maybe Congress would do something, but in the end they didn't. So there were 3 notices that were mandated that customers who were receiving the ACP benefit needed to receive from their ISP. These were written notices. So the first went out in January 25th, the second in March, and the third is, I said DBD, but I think it was probably April, May, and it was attached to their last bill, I believe it was, with the partial benefit. And so these notifications just explained to them that the program was in jeopardy, that it was unclear, you know, whether it would be continued, and that it was possible that the program would be ending last full month in April and a partial benefit potentially in May, up to the ISP whether they would provide that partial benefit in May. They also received notices from the Universal Services Administration company, USAC, which is federal agency, also making them aware that the program was potentially ending. So they did receive notices. Unfortunately, some of the notices that we've reviewed were really not clear and didn't provide some crucial information. For example, you know, how much their bill might increase, what the impact for them would be. And the onus was really oftentimes on the individual to figure out what their options were and what they wanted to do. Andrea, if you can take me to the next slide. So again, the burden was really kind of on the customer to explore whether their service provider offered a low-cost plan or a lower-cost plan that they might be eligible for, or if there was any other kind of options for them. So just to kind of lay it out, customers who were participating in ACP really were faced with three options. One, they could continue their service at full cost, which for many folks is, of course, unaffordable. That's why they were participating in the program. They could move to a lower cost plan if it was provided by their internet service provider, and that's a really big if, or they could discontinue service. And so those are really kind of the choices that customers were faced with and are probably still grappling with now. And we'll kind of come back to this, I think, toward the very end. And CETF can share more about, what they're doing to help walk customers through their options and find low-cost plans. And Andrea, if you can move me to the next slide. And so I guess just to really summarize this, basically we have nearly 3 million households in California who had been receiving this benefit, who no longer are receiving this benefit. And not only that, but of course they're doing it in an environment with rising inflation. So not only are they going to be facing a higher internet bill for them, but they're also facing higher costs across the board, in the last few years. And so they're going to be faced with really tough choices, right? About whether they cut back on another necessity for their household or whether they cut their internet service. And so we're just looking at, unfortunately, stepping back in time as far as the digital divide. We know from, national surveys, and Sunny and her team probably have some California surveys to back this up as well, that prior to the pandemic, 2/3 of households said that they were not affording internet because of cost. And we know that this remains just the biggest challenge for families, and that if, they weren't paying for internet or accessing internet before the pandemic because of cost, we can assume that many households are going to go back to that state. And the other thing I just want to highlight, of course, is that there remains a lot of confusion on the part of customers who, maybe didn't pay attention to some of those written notices that they got in the mail. Maybe they're only opening up some of them now and kind of confused about why their bill is going up $30 a month and what their options are. So there's a lot of customer education that still needs to take place. It has been taking place. CETF is operating a hotline that they'll talk more about. But just know that there's probably still a lot of confusion amongst your constituents about what's going on with their program, what's the state of it, what are their options. And as I mentioned before, some of the notices that went out were not really clear. Each ISP basically was able to craft their own notice that met certain guidelines. So they each looked a little bit different. And unfortunately, a lot of them didn't really talk about the exact cost impact, what their bill might look like, and what their options are. And again, it was often up to the customer to really take it upon themselves to investigate what their options were. So with that, Andrea, we'll move it to the next slide. And before we move on, I'll just open it up to Sunny and Marissa, if you have anything more to add before we turn to the next section about lessons learned.
The next slide, I think, is the lessons learned, Amy, but I would like just to, first of all, compliment you on the excellent presentation of what what is the current status, which we think is a crisis as we build this briefing to be. When we think about the amazing job that was actually done in California by everybody, and it was done under the umbrella of broadband for all. So Governor Newsom issued the broadband for all executive order actually in 2020, but did an announcement of that initiative in November of 2019 before anybody was aware we were about to go into a pandemic. And in that order, the California Emerging Technology Fund as one of the members of the California Broadband Council, were tasked with helping get all households online. And then fortunately, there was the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program that came in to give us the experience of how to ramp up. And then we have the Affordable Connectivity Program. And California reached that enrollment that Amy talked about of essentially a little over half of all eligible households, which is really good news. That was more than 1 million households above any other state. And for California, 1 percentage point of enrollment was 59,000 households. The next two states that actually were high performing and exceeded California on two metrics that we measured were New York, in which 1 percentage point was 31,000 households. And the next was Michigan, in which 1% was 16,000 households. So a huge lift. In less than 2 years, we got to 50%. And this, I think the context or just a way of comparing is that the Lifeline program has actually, for more than 4 decades, reached about a third of eligible households. So it was a huge, huge lift. It is really disturbing to us, the confusion that does exist for those who signed up for ACP, how they're going to transition to an affordable offer, which actually needs to be focused on. But even more sobering are the 2.9 million households that really are inclusive of that, the most digitally disadvantaged, the 800,000 households I talked about previously, who never even knew about the Affordable Connectivity Program because there wasn't advertising by either government or the internet service providers in channels that actually would reach them. So it is not sufficient to post on a website information about an internet affordable offer for people who are not online. It is literally, mind-boggling that we think that that's sufficient. So I wanted to underscore that. It's also really instructive from the statewide survey in 2023 to know the following, that among all households unconnected, the number one reason cited by 36.5% of the peoples. So the number one top cited, and that was by almost, over 36% of the folks, is because of affordability. And literally less than 3% say it's because of the lack of internet access. Now, let me hasten to say the California Emerging Technology Fund, I dare say all of us on this call, are in the column of supporting ubiquitous deployment. We need internet everywhere for a whole variety of reasons. And our state is again led and has had as much as $10 billion identified for deployment. However, we still have to engage on a solution for affordability, and particularly for the 2.9 million households that were eligible, the poorest, to get them online. So I wanted to underscore that, Amy, and those data points are worth understanding in our going forward on looking at policy options.
Appreciate that, Sunny. Thank you for providing that additional context. So we're going to move ahead and look at lessons learned from both of our organizations who, spent a lot of time out in the field and otherwise trying to do enrollment, trying to, do partnerships to get more folks online and to access this subsidy that they were all entitled to. And I want to also just make a note here that this isn't just backward looking, right? It is at the moment, but what we're really hoping is that these lessons can inform future policy and future efforts to figure out this very thorny issue. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Arturo to walk us through some of NextGen's lessons learned.
Thank you very much, Amy. Appreciate it. So as Amy just mentioned, NextGen engaged in statewide enrollment efforts of the ACP initiative in the past year. And we just want to go over some of the lessons learned, as Amy mentioned, to try to help inform policy going forward. So what we found is even with the right resources in place, reaching the remaining households in a cost-effective manner was challenging. The ACP initiative was by no means, of course, perfect, And although well-meaning, some of the processes that were put in place did create numerous barriers and challenges. And this was both for enrollees and enrollment staff. These challenges were experienced, again, by groups on both ends. And we'll just share some additional insights gained from our involvement in several statewide enrollment events, including in LA County, or Southern California, I should say, Central California, and Northern California. Next slide, please. Okay. So one of the first challenges that we encountered were among planning or logistical, training of enrollment staff. The ACP application itself, although standardized in a lot of ways, was often its own quagmire. Consistent training and retraining for enrollment process was necessary. Oftentimes because you would hit different parts of the application that were unfamiliar, and other times because the application process itself was updated, and so retraining was necessary. We also found that one application experience could look very different from one event to the next. Even with the creation or institution of best practices, which we did implement, we found that across many events, there were many new occurrences that would come up that we had not encountered before. Another challenge while planning these events was the limitation at times of Spanish speaking enrollment staff at a significant amount of our enrollment events. These were, of course, based on need. They were predominantly in Spanish speaking communities. So dual or multilingual instruction was a consistent challenge. Many of these communities have immigrant populations whose first language, of course, is in English. So this was a constant challenge. Finding an appropriate event space was sometimes a challenge as well. The space, we found that spaces needed to be appropriate for a certain setup. On the next gen side, we had sure to have tables, the right technology, the right visual aid materials or seating, or waiting area was always necessary. So again, working with partners on the ground to find the right sort of venue created its own logistical challenges. We also found that working with trusted community partners was best. Finding community partners who were not only sympathetic to the issue of the digital divide, but believed enough in the ACP initiative. And of course, there was a need to create trust with these community partners so that we could effectively partner together. But this was crucial as well because it not only helped foster and develop trust from the community organizational side, but also with community members. I think this was key, right? People won't simply work with you because you show up to a community and you're well-intended or you're offering access or services that they qualify for or need. So leveraging existing trust with community-based organizations who already do work on the ground with these communities is a necessary ingredient for success. We also found that leveraging existing events, so many times these community-based organizations already have community engagement events that they plan out throughout the year. Leveraging those events was very effective. It minimized the lift of having to stand up an entirely new event, which can be a very difficult process, and also marketing and planning it. And it also helped drive community members out as well. Marketing materials was also something that created a little bit of a challenge because of the dual or multilingual aspect of this. So translating the appropriate materials, having appropriate staff to translate these materials, or a budget for a third party to do so was at times a bit of a challenge. Marketing an event. So again, many times you had to make sure to market an event in a dual or multilingual fashion. At these events, we also made sure to have materials that were, again, dual or multilingual. So printing out ACP applications that were in English or Spanish or another appropriate language, depending on community demographics, was also a necessity. You might ask yourself, well, why? What's the need for the paper applications? Many times, well, sometimes we found that folks don't trust enrollment applications online, and so we try to meet them where they feel most comfortable, or where they feel more secure. At times, that's a paper application. Another thing that we found that we had to account for as well, the ACP enrollment process was challenging for several reasons, but one of the main reasons was everything was conducted through email. So many times, if people did not have a working or existing email, you essentially could not move forward in the enrollment or registration process of the ACP application. You'd have to first help folks set up the email, and then you could start the application process. So as you can imagine, this many times would cause a delay. Sometimes it would cause an extra step, and folks could lose faith in the process, or just become a little frustrated with it. Lastly, visual aids with various government assistance program and documents were extremely helpful to have during these events. And I'll touch on this a little bit more. Next slide, please. Technology. So we found that it was important to have the right tech to minimize pitfalls and maximize enrollment. Laptop or tablet devices for enrollment were both sufficient, but we personally at NextGen found that tablets were the best for our enrollment events. And it was just not an existing, but a strong internet connection that was also a necessity at any location or venue that you worked at. And depending on the venue, this could create additional barriers. One prominent example that sticks out in my mind is we had an event in LA in the city of North Hills at the North Hills Community Park in December of last year. This event was in collaboration with the congressional office of that community, the assembly district, and city council offices, as well as Charter Spectrum. There was a concrete building that was there that served as the general event space at this park. And after we had decided on this place as a location for the event that we were putting on, we found out that there was no Wi-Fi connection. So we quickly tried to problem solve this. We thought about maybe using hotspots. We thought about maybe using enrollment staff's phones. Luckily, we were able to work with Charter Spectrum to bring in a mobile Wi-Fi trailer. This itself is a gigantic sort of mobile unit that's used for events by Charter Spectrum at times. Of course, it's not something that we could have procured ourselves. But it wasn't just about the unit. They also needed the appropriate technical experts to be there to help with setup, to run the unit during the event, and of course, troubleshoot any sort of issues that may come up. And in fact, at one point, we found that while we were enrolling folks into the ACP, the internet connection was not strong enough, and so we had to ask them to heighten the length of the device in order to get us a stronger connection. So the cost or technical ability of doing something like this on our own, without other partners like Charter Spectrum, would have been close to zero. We were lucky enough to have them as a partner at this event, and without their participation, I think we would have really struggled to be able to have a strong internet connection to successfully enroll people. Some other unforeseen challenges. The application process, as mentioned earlier, was a bit of a constant procedural hazard. The system at times would detect dual applications. So, for example, you'd meet with somebody, you'd start the enrollment applications, the application process with them. And this was a two-step process. It was a process of registering an account with the website and then actually enrolling folks through the application process. So when you would register somebody, the system sometimes would notify you that they already had an existing account. And 9 times out of 10, the person that you were working with wouldn't have a recollection of ever creating an account. And so this would, of course, cause some confusion. The only 2 ways to solve for this was either by logging into the existing account with a password, which, of course, they never remembered or didn't have, or resetting the password. And of course, resetting the password many times was not an option because they didn't remember their username, or they didn't remember the email that they used. Or in many times they would just simply say, I've never done this before. I don't know why it's coming up as, why it's showing that this is a duplicative effort. The other option was calling into the ACP hotline, which they did have. But in the middle of an enrollment event, you can imagine this could create a serious backlog. And of course, there was no guarantee that you'd be able to speak with an ACP representative right away.
Artur, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna jump in here, do a quick time check. We're at 2:47, so if you don't mind, I'm just gonna kind of move us to the lessons learned from CETF.
Sure.
And Arturo, you did a great job, and I couldn't help but keep smiling. You keep identifying all these issues, and I'm jumping in only, Amy, to say, so everyone knows, Marisa Canchet, on behalf of our team, literally led the mobilization statewide Get Connected California and organized with state agencies and partners on 3 different statewide Get Connected days, 61 in-person enrollment events. So let's take what Arturo said and multiply it times 61, and that's what Marisa managed. Marisa.
As you could tell, I was nodding my head, to so many of your statements when it came to the challenges, because it certainly was, we definitely experienced our own set of challenges as well. And I can, identify with the ones you mentioned. So thank you for presenting that so eloquently, Arturo. I really appreciate it. Next slide, please. All right. So, yeah, I just, want to take a quick moment to really recognize definitely some of the lessons that CETF has learned, but more importantly, I think some of the really important and significant strides that we have been able to accomplish in order to bridge the digital divide. I think the common thread here, I think goes without saying, we have not been able to do this alone. We have always had to lean on our partners when it came to, partners with through community-based organizations, state agencies, local agencies, our Get Connected call center, which is staffed by nonprofit organizations located throughout the state of California. We have not been able to do the notable achievements you see here without the support of so many of our wonderful partners located throughout the state. So I just want to, take a minute to say that I think in order to tackle any kind of significant challenge, truly, doing it as a team, doing it in partnership with other agencies and organizations is really key. So I just want to briefly just kind of, review some of the achievements so far CETF has been able to accomplish. First and foremost, we've developed a really robust network of CBOs throughout our state, which have then been able to connect over 1 million households to affordable internet service and also provide digital literacy training. As Sunny just mentioned, yes, we were able to successfully accomplish many ACP enrollment events throughout our state with the support of our network of CBOs. Our CBOs did a tremendous job at offering that in-person support that so many of our community members needed in order to, 1, understand what the ACP program was about, and then 2, to get through that application process. And so I want to just commend our CBOs for, helping our community out in achieving that. I think the next bullet point regarding DHCS and CDSS, I think, has been one of our most successful achievements so far. We asked them to do what we consider to be the most effective form of communication. We refer to that as direct notification, and by that it's basically targeting an eligible population of households that could qualify for, in this case, ACP, but moving forward for the affordable offers that are now available from most ISPs throughout our state. And so we really wanted to just commend DHCS and CDSS for, for doing that direct notification. Our call center has fielded all of those calls, and has been super busy even up until today in taking those calls from the participants in those programs. And to address a point that Amy mentioned earlier about, when ACP sunsetted and folks were not sure what to do next, our call center did a tremendous job of fielding a lot of those calls and those concerns from callers who were confused by the notices that they were receiving from ISPs, not sure what their options were moving forward to be able to, have adequate and sustainable internet in their home. And our call center agents have done a tremendous job of truly educating and walking consumers through that process of understanding and then applying and enrolling into affordable internet plans. So again, I just want to, commend our call center and thank those state agencies for doing that. And then last but not least, we've been able to complete about over 48,000 enrollments starting from the EBB. If I'm sure you all remember, the first iteration of ACP was the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program. So from EBB through ACP, we did a significant amount of enrollment. And again, just want to thank our call centers and our CBOs for doing that. Next slide, please. So this is what we at CETF refer to as the four-part approach to a full adoption. So of course, starting with the most important piece, which is direct notification. It's really a trusted resource like a state agency, like a county or a CBO that has that direct contact to the eligible households that are most in need of learning about and hearing about now affordable internet offers. So that's the first step, is to get an agency or an organization to send out that direct notification. And then the next 3 parts is, one, getting that consumer connected to our call center so that, again, our CBOs can help with enrollment and not only with enrollment, but also referrals to digital literacy. CETF offers 2 versions or 2 options for digital literacy. And so our call center agents are actively referring anyone who's completed an enrollment for an affordable offer to digital literacy classes. And then, of course, the second part is getting those consumers through the digital literacy training. We currently are offering both in-person and hybrid and self-paced digital literacy training. And so we're really proud of the curriculum that CETF has developed, and also the Digital Learn platform, which is the online self-paced learning tool that we've also developed over the year. And we're really proud of that. And so far, so good. We've received really great feedback from those that have participated in our training. And again, with the help of our CBOs, we're able to do that. And then, of course, the last part to completing a full adoption would be to be able to provide the consumer with a device. We are fortunate through donations, but also through grants that we received, that we've been able to supply most participants that have completed this full journey with us a device. So without once someone has connected to internet and now someone has completed training, a device is like the next best thing. It doesn't really make sense not to have a device since, they've gone through this journey and there's, no device at the end to show for it. So it's really important for our organization to be able to provide a device, or at least make a referral on where they can find an affordable device, for their household. Next slide, please. Okay, so I think we can move on to the next slide. And again, this is just sort of a staggering statement here that I think we have been underscoring throughout this entire presentation. How are we going to tackle this significant number of households that are at risk of being underconnected or underconnected? On our next slide, I'll share with you some of the resources that we provide. So if you could jump to the next slide, please, Andrea. We have our Internet for All Now website, where consumers can visit our site to find low-cost offers by typing in their zip code, and it'll automatically populate for them the ISPs in their area that they can reach out to connect to an affordable offer. or they can receive, enrollment service and information at our call center. And so again, I think our call center is probably CETF's jewel. We have worked really hard. We have a wonderful call center director, Patty Bibby, who oversees the CBOs that are staffing the call center day in and day out. And really, does a tremendous job at coaching them through, the calls, and really taking time to understand what kind of calls are coming in and how we can offer, best support to be able to facilitate their questions and concerns about current connectivity and their future connectivity moving forward without ACP. And next slide. Okay. So I'm going to touch on the first and the last bullet points, but I'm going to hand it over to Sunny to wrap us up for the second, the third, and the fourth bullet points, because I know she does a tremendous job at eloquently sharing and taking that call to action to everybody that's on this call with us to really drive the message home on how we can assist low-income households with opportunities to connect and stay connected to internet. The first one, of course, is sharing resources. As I mentioned earlier, we can't do it alone. We really do rely on the interest of organizations and agencies that are just as much invested in digital equity as we are. And so we are right now working with counties, school districts, anyone who would, who's interested in really offering that support to their constituents on what to do next without ACP. And like I said, having our call center as our backbone for being able to support callers through that process. And then the last point is, we are continuing our partnership with DHCS and DCSS to do another round of notification. We're really excited about that. It couldn't come at a better time. Of Medi-Cal happening, over the summer. We're actively putting and inserting information about low-cost offers into those packets that are going to be going out for recertification. So we're excited to see that happen. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Sunny to take us home.
We know all of your members can talk directly to your members of the California congressional delegation, the largest of any state. And so that is the communication, and whether or not it's a blue member of the congressional delegation or a red member, they have a role to play. So there are 11 red members who can talk to the 5 Republicans in the House negotiating budget deals. That needs to be a mobilization. Going to the next one, all of our blue members can actually request, really importantly, that the Federal Communications Commission share back with states those who enrolled and those who did not, that were part of the major benefits programs that automatically qualified someone for ACP. So that's Medicaid or Medi-Cal in California, food stamps or CalFresh, the WIC program, Pell Grants, but in particular, Medi-Cal and CalFresh. We want our congressional delegation to get the members of the White House that are involved and the FCC to share data with us. And lastly, a number of legislators have signed letters to the internet service provider CEOs, all headquartered outside of California, but have asked these ISP CEOs literally step up and voluntarily agree to sustain affordable offer, to actually promote it in public, to do that in language and culture and not do upselling. So with that, we will be here to support you, and I'll turn it back to Amy.
Thanks so much, Sunny and Marissa and team. I think what you heard, just to kind of summarize, is that it takes a whole lot of grassroots outreach with cultural competency and language support to connect with folks who won't otherwise hear it. But it also takes a whole lot of advertising and direct notification, most effectively, from government agencies where we know folks are already participating in programs. So with that, I know we're over time. For those who can join us. If you have any questions, I know I can stick around for a few minutes. Hopefully Marissa and Sunny can as well. So feel free to put your questions in the chat or use the Q&A function. We did get a question about whether the PowerPoint is going to be shared, and indeed it will. And I also dropped our contact information in the chat box, so you can see that, and please feel free to follow up. And if you don't mind, Andrea, just going to the last slide, I think that also has our contact information. So thank you all so much for joining us. It's an urgent topic, and we're so glad that you were here to kind of learn more, and hopefully you can figure out what you can do whatever your role is, whether it's dealing with constituents or kind of in the policy lane to help address this crisis. So with that, let's open it up to any questions, and I'll just keep the line open for a little bit if anyone else wants to ask questions.
And while people are thinking about their questions, if you're still listening, I can see you are. Those call to actions that we just went through can be very, very powerful. And so know just that every time you and your member raises this issue, it has an impact.
And while we're at it and summarizing, I'll say one other thing that I just want to triple underscore that came out, I think, at a few points in the presentation is, when thinking about doing some type of benefit program like this, make it as easy as possible. Make the application as easy as possible because it trips people up. It's a barrier, and it shouldn't be, right? So I would say that for me is one of the key takeaways from all of this. And sometimes it's outside of our control, but for the policymakers out there, let's keep that in mind.
We wholeheartedly underscore that, Amy, and we call that it needs to be an off-ramp, i.e. you're automatically qualified and you can opt out, as opposed to you have to navigate so much, of the bureaucracy to have an on-ramp. And as relatively efficient that the FCC made the process, as you heard Arturo go through, we would be able to enroll, just so everyone knows, within 5 minutes, a household that was linked to a benefit program. So if they had the documents that said, I'm in Medi-Cal, I'm in CalFresh, I am Tribal TANF, it actually was a very quick process. What was challenging is that someone might not have all the paperwork, or there would be confusion of names, as you heard, a confusion of names in the government database, not by the customer. And if they also didn't have or want to share a social security number, it could be more difficult to actually enroll. But linked to a benefits program, even if that was still the condition going forward, made it very, very easy. And then there's no question about, if you will, qualifications by any internet service provider. Either you're on one of these government benefit programs or you're not, and that makes it easier for the ISPs. And you acknowledged how valuable it can be to have a collaborative partnership with an internet service provider. In the case of Charter Spectrum, helping get the site up. We always really wanted to and invited having internet service providers be at these ACP enrollment events. We had to, we separated appropriately where people came to get registered from then taking that eligibility, that registration, and going and enrolling in a internet plan. But it's public-private collaboration that will actually carry us home and get the job done, which is why we're very excited that so many legislators signed letters to the CEOs and are asking them to meet with the legislators to figure out how we work together going forward.
Well, I don't see any questions in the chat, Sunny. So I think that'll be kind of the last word from you. I think it's a good parting thought that we need partnership. We need public-private partnership. We need all of us kind of both dealing with the immediate fallout right now, but also figuring out solutions going forward. So thank you everyone so much for joining us today. We will send out the PowerPoint presentation, and you should all have our contact information, and please do reach out to us. We're always happy to chat and answer any questions you might have. With that, thank you and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.